The day I got my acceptance letter from Aldercrest University, I saw myself 7 days into the future. After Mom and Dad saw that Aldercrest took me, were they proud of me? Did Cameron and Evan finally stop saying I couldn't measure up to Tessa in any way? I couldn't keep the hope out of my voice. What answered me was a bitter laugh. No. When they found out Aldercrest accepted me, Tessa couldn't handle it and ran away from home. She was gone all night, and the family spent that whole night blaming me for showing off, for not applying to the same school as her. After they found her, Mom and Dad took us on a trip to cheer her up, and we ran into a mudslide. Every one of them abandoned me to protect Tessa, right when I was about to be rescued. Her voice faltered, and grief came over her face. They rushed a frightened Tessa to the hospital, never knowing I'd already been dead for 24 hours. You've seen how I end up. Whether you tell them is up to you. Willa's POV. The girl in front of me vanished. I gripped the acceptance letter until my knuckles ached, and pain twisted through my chest. Working myself to the bone to prove I was worth something was never going to earn their love, so I was done wanting anything from them. When I got home, Mom was in the living room packing Tessa's suitcase. She tucked a carefully organized bag of medication inside, murmuring as she went, "Your stomach's delicate. Don't leave the backup meds behind." Tessa hung off Mom's arm. "Mom, my acceptance letter hasn't even come yet. Isn't it way too early to pack?" Mom smoothed her hair, doting. "Too early? If we wait until move-in week, we'll forget half of it." Dad couldn't help with the packing, so he pulled out his phone and sent money instead. "Buy whatever you want. Don't go without anything." Tessa opened the notification, saw the number, and nearly came out of her chair. 5,000? Dad, you're the best. Then something occurred to her, and she asked him with a conspiratorial look, "Dad, how much did you send Willa?" She asked that every single time our parents transferred money. With me standing right there, they always said the amounts were the same. They hadn't noticed me yet. So I wanted to know too. How much did Dad give me when I wasn't in the room? Dad laughed, a little helpless. "Same as always. This one's just for you. I'm not sending her anything." My toe slammed into the threshold. The dull thud turned every head in the living room toward me. Their smiles were still there, frozen and unnatural. I couldn't help mocking myself. I'd always known they favored Tessa, so why did it still hurt? Cameron's brows drew together, and he did what he always did and broke the awkwardness by blaming me. "Gone all morning, and you finally turn up right at mealtime. You were slacking off. You just didn't want to help Tessa pack. I'll give you a chance to make up for it. Memorize this." He walked over and pushed a list into my hand. "Tessa's skin breaks out easily. Air her bedding out once a week. Tessa sleeps in. Have her breakfast bought and ready every morning." I stopped reading. The rest was more of the same. All of it about how to take care of Tessa. I pushed the list back at him. "I'm not memorizing it." I said it quietly, but the room went cold. Maybe they were just too used to me being agreeable. It took a long moment before Evan finally looked at me, unhappy. "Do you have any idea how long that list took me? Tessa has asthma. The three of us are going to the same school. Looking out for each other is the least we can do." He said it with such conviction that I laughed. "Every line on there is me taking care of Tessa. You call that looking out for each other?" Before he could answer, Mom weighed in with the patient, reasonable tone she saved for correcting me. "Willa, Evan's not wrong. You're mature, you're independent, you can handle hardship, and you're the older sister. You should be looking after her." My nails dug into my palms. Ever since they tracked me down and brought me home at 15, the line I heard most was that the older sister ought to give a little more to Tessa. I'd grown up on a farm, so they simply assumed I was tough and could take it. Even though I was the Carvers' biological daughter, the girl they'd raised themselves always came first. It wasn't as though I'd never cried about it. Tessa and I are the same age. Why do I always have to give in? They told me that once Tessa got into college, they'd make it up to me. I believed them. I wanted their approval too badly. For 3 years I never competed with Tessa for anything. The one selfish thing I let myself do came when applications were due. Without telling a soul, I sent mine to Aldercrest. I'd been saving it to surprise them today. If I hadn't met the version of myself from 7 days out, I'd still be sitting here hoping like an idiot. The ache in my chest sharpened. I looked at Mom and answered her seriously. If Evan cares that much about Tessa, let him take care of her. After all, the two of them were the ones going to Maplehurst State. I was going to Aldercrest. Mom's face darkened. Before she could get a word out, Tessa caught her arm. "Mom, it really isn't fair to make Willa look after me. I'll do my best to manage on my own. I won't make any of you worry." Mom cupped her cheek, aching with tenderness. "That's my Tessa. Always knows how to make me feel better." Then she cut a glance at me, her voice thinning with irritation. "You're the only one. Your grades are worse than hers, and all you do is upset me." My eyes stung, hot and wet. It was true that on our regular exams I usually finished one rank below Tessa, but I'd fought to close that gap in the final stretch. Looking at Mom's angry face, something bitter churned in me. I really did want to know what would happen if I told her Aldercrest had taken me. Would she still tear into me for Tessa's sake, drag me on that trip, and then stand by while I died? I opened my mouth, but Tessa cut in before I got a sound out. Mom, Dad, I'm starving. Can we eat first? Smiling, she took both their hands and steered them to the dining table. For once, Cameron lifted the backpack off my shoulders and hung it by the door. He still couldn't resist a comment. Food's been ready forever. If we weren't waiting on you, we'd have finished already. Right. When something kept me out past mealtime, all that was left for me were leftovers. They'd never let Tessa go hungry. I glanced at the 2 suitcases already packed in the living room. I didn't bother pointing out that the meal was late because they'd all been busy packing Tessa's things. The table was covered in Tessa's favorites, the way it always was. Halfway through, Tessa stood and raised her juice. Under our parents' puzzled looks, her eyes went red. Mom, Dad, thank you for raising me and giving me everything. I'll never forget that the people who gave birth to me didn't want me because I was sickly, and you two took me anyway. I'll never forget the night my fever hit 101, and you drove me to the hospital and sat with me until morning. I want to be your daughter for the rest of my life. My parents cried. My chest just felt tight. When Tessa had the flu that year, I caught it too. My fever climbed to 104, worse than hers ever got. But they were in such a rush to get her to the hospital that nobody noticed anything wrong with me. They came home to find me unconscious, and only then remembered to take me in. By the time I was out of danger and woke up, there was no one beside me. I found out later they'd gone home to look after Tessa. Tessa turned to Cameron and Evan next. Thank you, Cameron, for treating me like a little princess and saving the best of everything for me. Thank you, Evan, for being my handsome bodyguard so nobody ever dared pick on me. Tessa had the whole table sentimental and heavy. Then Evan kicked me under it. That was when I registered that Mom, Dad, and Cameron were all looking at me expectantly. Willa, everyone's happy today. Say a few words. Tessa's expression was perfectly natural. Her voice was soft, but it went in like a nail. That was her gift. On the surface, she never looked like a threat to anyone. And then she'd put me on the spot the moment my guard was down. I looked back at her, out of patience. What exactly do you want me to say? Should I mention that when Tessa got stressed before finals, our parents hired her an expensive private therapist? What I got was one sentence. If you're nervous, take a deep breath. We know you'll do fine. The first time we met, she called me a hick under her breath. Then she went crying to Cameron and he warned me. Don't show up here and start setting Tessa off. Their patience was running out. I finally started to speak. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for bringing me home and paying for my education. Thank you, Cameron and Evan, for helping me with my schoolwork. When I stopped there, everyone froze. Next to Tessa's speech, mine was so thin it sounded like a brush-off. But I dug through my memory for a long time, and those were the only gracious things I could honestly come up with. Even the tutoring only happened because Cameron and Evan were already bringing Tessa's grades up and let me sit in. The room went cold again. Mom wouldn't look at me. Cameron and Evan wore complicated expressions. Tessa sat quietly with a faint smile on her lips. Only Dad cleared his throat and lifted his head to look at me. Willa, are you blaming your mother and me for overlooking you? We're both so busy with work. You've got a right to be upset. I'll send you $300. Buy whatever you like. That was how he did it. The moment it finally registered that he'd hurt me, he'd play the good father for a few minutes and wire me money. But it never came close to what Tessa got. He pulled out his phone. He was entering his passcode when Tessa cried out and dropped to the floor. Her juice glass shattered beside her. Everyone panicked. Evan got to her first and gathered her up. Get her inhaler. She's having an attack. The dining room dissolved into chaos, everyone crowding around her. When her face went red, Evan carried her toward the door. This is bad. She needs the ER. He was frantic, and he slammed into me as he passed. I wasn't braced for it. My slipper slid off, and my bare foot came down on the broken glass. I cried out. Every mind in that room was on Tessa. Not one person looked at me. I watched them disappear through the doorway, and I finally understood the version of myself from 7 days out. Abandoned with rescue that close, watching everyone run off to save Tessa. I understood exactly how hopeless that must have felt. I forced down the grief rising in my chest. I limped to my room, picked the glass out of my foot, and bandaged it myself. I didn't go to the hospital. Nobody came home all night, and I didn't call. The next morning at breakfast, Evan came to find me. He looked wrecked. He didn't seem to have slept at all, and his voice was hoarse. Tessa ate peanut butter by accident. That's what set it off. Willa, she's fragile and she's careless. The two of you are going to be roommates, so you have to watch her closely. He hadn't noticed the bandage on my foot. Every thought in his head belonged to Tessa. I looked at him and answered evenly. I can't room with her, and I'm not going to be responsible for her. The air went dead. 2 seconds later, he sat up straight and stared at me, accusing. You won't even room with her, just so you don't have to take care of her? You know how bad her attacks get. How can you be that cold? When the Carvers first brought me home, Cameron said growing up on a farm had made me mature for my age. He told me to watch Tessa and keep her away from anything she might react to. Evan walked in on the tail end of that and took my side immediately. Cameron, your own sister is skin and bones. She's obviously undernourished. Shouldn't somebody be taking care of her? No one had ever stood up for me before, and that one sentence was all it took. At my first birthday in the Carver house, my family gave Tessa expensive, beautifully chosen gifts. Mine was clearly grabbed off a shelf. Evan was the only one who gave me exactly what he gave Tessa. I thought he was different. Later I found out he was the same as the rest of them. Tessa came first. Just like now. He never asked me why I couldn't room with her. He just called me heartless. His impatience got under my skin. Fine. I'm heartless. If you're so worried about Tessa, why don't you rent a place off campus with her? What did you just say? Evan stared at me stunned. I had no interest in arguing anymore, so I got up and went to my room. I started packing, and I'd just gotten my suitcase closed when Cameron walked in without knocking. Evan says the two of you got into it over Tessa. We did. I looked up at him. He scoffed. You applied to the same school as Tessa because you wanted to stick to them. And now you're saying all this just to make her feel awful. I stared at him, not following. Then he said, Tessa heard about your fight. She's been crying at the hospital. To smooth things over, Mom and Dad decided the whole family's taking a trip to the Pineglass Highlands as soon as she's discharged. My mind went blank. The Pineglass Highlands. Wasn't that where I was supposed to die? I'd already dropped the whole thing about my acceptance letter. Why were they still dragging me on this trip? My hands started shaking, and my voice came out unsteady. I'm not going. That area gets a lot of rain. There'll be mudslides. My parents walked in just in time to hear it. Mom glared at me. Willa, what on earth is wrong with you? You've been off since yesterday, and now you're talking nonsense. Are you trying to pick a fight with us? It isn't nonsense. I looked at her and finally asked the question I'd been holding in. If there really were a mudslide, and Tessa and I were both in danger, which one of us would you save first? Mom answered without thinking. Tessa, obviously. The second it was out, she froze. Guilt flickered in her eyes, and then she doubled down. Tessa's health is poor. What's wrong with saving her first? And the weather's fine. What's the point of inventing questions like that except to start something? By the end she had a hand pressed to her chest, furious. Cameron stepped in to steady her and jabbed a finger at me. Willa, you get into college and suddenly you're too big to listen to anybody? You're inventing excuses because you want to make life difficult for us. Let me be clear. Tessa wants this trip to patch things up with you, so you're going whether you like it or not. Dad sighed too. Willa, why are you being so difficult lately? You and Tessa are going to be living together for the next 4 years. Do you really want it to be like this? I stood there and felt myself go cold all the way through. Even in a hypothetical, they picked Tessa outright. They wouldn't even bother lying to spare me. The tears came and wouldn't stop. Cameron looked disgusted. You're the one who caused this. Don't try to cry your way out of it. Then he walked Mom out. Dad glanced at me once and followed. From the living room I heard Cameron griping. There's something wrong with her head. If we were actually in danger, does she think we'd just leave her? But the truth was that the second Tessa was involved, they'd leave me behind without a second thought. And why should I hand over my life just to keep Tessa in a good mood? For the next several days I mostly stayed in my room. They were all at the hospital with her, and couldn't be bothered with me. I cleared out everything in that house that was mine. The night Tessa was discharged, Evan stopped by long enough to say one thing. Pack your stuff. We leave for the Pineglass Highlands tomorrow morning. Then he was gone. He never saw the ticket on my phone, the first train to Northgate the next morning. Before sunrise, I left the promissory note and the no-contact declaration under the lamp on my desk. $15,000. Everything they'd spent on me in 3 years, allowance included. I took my suitcase, called a car to the station, scanned my ticket, and got on the train. The moment it started moving, the weight I'd been carrying finally set down. No trip to cheer Tessa up. No dying out there. Right then a message came in from Cameron. Where are you? Mom and Dad are waiting. Use this trip to make up with Tessa. Then you'll have someone looking out for you in the dorm. I typed back. Not going. I'm going to Aldercrest. My phone vibrated violently in my hand almost the instant the text went through. Cameron's name flashed across the screen, followed immediately by an incoming call. I didn't answer. A second later, the screen lit up with a barrage of text. Messages. Cameron. Aldercrest? Are you insane, Willa? You couldn't even beat Tessa in the mock exams. Stop lying just to save face. Cameron. Mom is crying. Dad is furious. You turn around and get to the highway pickup spot right now, or don't bother coming back at all. Evan. Willa, this isn't funny. You're throwing a Tantrum over a trip? Aldercrest's acceptance letters went out weeks ago. You don't have to fabricate an elite university just to prove a point. I stared at the glowing blue light of the screen, my expression devoid of any warmth. They truly believed it was impossible. In their minds, the hierarchy of the Carver household was fixed in stone. Tessa was the brilliant, delicate princess, destined for praise, and I was the sturdy, mediocre farm girl who existed solely to be her shadow and footstool. The idea that I could score higher than Tessa on the National College entrance exam, high enough to clear the threshold for Aldercrest University, the top institution in the country, was a reality there. Egos refused to process. I tapped the screen, opened Cameron's contact card, and hit block. Then I did the same for Evan, my mother, and my father. Next, I pulled out my SIM card, snapped it cleanly in half between my thumb and forefinger, and tossed the plastic pieces into the small metal trash receptacle under the train window. The low rhythmic thrum of the train wheels against the tracks was the only sound in the cabin. Outside, the familiar suburban sprawl of our town shrank into tiny, indistinct dots before disappearing entirely behind rolling green hills. 5 hours later, the train pulled into Northgate Station. The air in the northern capital was crisp, sharp, and carried the scent of pine and impending rain. I hauled my single hardshell suitcase off the platform and stepped into the bustling plaza. I headed straight for Aldercrest University's early arrival administrative office. Because I had received the Dean's Honors Scholarship, I was entitled to move into the International Honors dormitories 2 weeks before the official orientation week. The registrar officer, a middle-aged woman with silver-rimmed glasses, checked my identification and printed out my room keycard. Willa Carver? She looked up, her eyes crinkling with a warm, genuine smile. Welcome to Aldercrest. You scored in the top 0.1% of the entire Eastern District this year. Your academic advisor, Dr. Halloway, has already set up your lab access for the autumn term. Thank you, I said softly. For 3 years, I had believed that praise was something you had to bleed for, something you had to trade your self-respect to receive. Hearing it delivered so naturally, simply because of my own hard work, made a strange hot tightness form in the back of my throat. My room was on the 4th floor of a stone building covered in ivy. It was small, bright, and completely mine. It had a long wooden desk positioned right beside a bay window that overlooked the central quadrangle. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking. I placed my few books on the shelf, folded my clothes neatly into the wardrobe, and set my notebook on the desk. When I was finished, I sat down by the window. The sky outside was turning a deep indigo blue. According to the timeline the future version of myself had shown me, tonight was the night the Carver family would drive up to the Pineglass Highlands. Tonight was the night the heavy mountain rain would loosen the earth on the upper slope, sending hundreds of tons of liquid mud crashing down onto the highway bypass. In that timeline, I was trapped in the back seat of the SUV, my leg crushed beneath the collapsed frame, screaming as the mud rose to my chin. I remembered the sight of Cameron cutting Tessa's seatbelt first, Evan smashing her window to pull her out, and my mother crying out, "Save Tessa. She can't breathe." None of them had looked back. Not once. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, letting out a long, quiet breath. The storm was coming, but I was no longer in its path. 200 miles south, at the base of the Pineglass Mountain Trail, a sleek, black SUV pulled into the driveway of a luxury mountain resort. The rain was coming down in sheets, heavy and relentless, beating against the windshield with a deafening roar. Inside the car, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. "She really blocked us," Cameron said, staring at his phone in disbelief. I tried calling her from a burner app, and she disconnected the line entirely. He actually threw away her phone number. My mother sat in the front passenger seat, her face pale with anger. "She's doing this on purpose. She knows how much effort went into planning this trip for Tessa, and she's sitting somewhere in the city, waiting for us to panic and go begging her to come back." "Mom, don't be mad at Willa," Tessa whispered from the back seat, clutching a plush blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were red, and her voice sounded tiny and frail. "It's all my fault. If I hadn't gotten sick at dinner, she wouldn't have felt left out. Maybe we should go back and find her." Evan immediately turned to stroke Tessa's hair, his face filled with irritation. At the mention of my name, "Don't you dare apologize for her, Tessa," Evan said sharply. "She's 18 years old. If she wants to play games and lie about getting into Aldercrest, let her. When she runs out of money in 2 days, she'll come crawling home." My father sighed heavily from the driver's seat, rubbing his temples. "Enough. We're here to relax. I'm not letting Willa ruin this weekend for the rest of us. Let's check in." They unpacked their luggage and checked into 2 connected luxury suites, overlooking the valley. By midnight, the storm outside reached a violent peak. Thunder shook the glass panes of the resort, and the wind howled through the pines like a dying animal. Suddenly, a deafening crack roared from the mountain ridge above the resort. The lights in the hotel flickered once, twice, and went out completely. Red emergency lights bathed the hallway in an eerie, bloody glow followed immediately by the blare of sirens and hotel staff pounding on doors. Evacuation. Everyone out. The upper ridge has collapsed. There's a mudslide heading toward the south wing. Panic erupted instantly. My father threw open the suite door, grabbing my mother by the arm. Cameron, Evan, get Tessa. In the dark, chaos reigned. Guests were screaming, shoving each other down the narrow stairwells as the smell of wet earth and snapped pine trees flooded the air. Evan grabbed Tessa's hand, but as they reached the second-floor landing, Tessa let out a sharp gasp, fell to her knees, and began clutching her chest. My inhaler. Tessa gasped, her eyes rolling back. I left it in the room. What? Cameron yelled over the roar of the storm outside. You didn't put it in your coat pocket like I told you. In the past, whenever Tessa forgot her medicine during a crisis, I was the one ordered to run back into danger to retrieve it. I was the one who knew exactly which pocket of which bag held her backup doses. Now there was no one to run back. Evan, stay with her. I'll go get it. Cameron shouted, turning back toward the stairs. But before he could take 2 steps, a massive structural crack split the drywall above them, and a torrent of thick, black mud and debris shattered the second-floor windows, flooding the corridor. Cameron, look out! Evan screamed, tackling his brother to the floor as a heavy wooden beam crashed down where Cameron had been standing a second before. Tessa shrieked in terror, a loud, piercing, perfectly healthy scream that carried zero trace of bronchial constriction. She sprang to her feet with remarkable agility, abandoning both of her brothers, and sprinted down the remaining stairs toward the lobby. Cameron, dragging himself up from the debris with a bleeding scrape across his forehead, stared at the empty stairwell where Tessa had just been standing. For the first time in his life, a strange, sickening knot formed in his stomach. There was no asthma attack. The moment real, life-threatening danger hit her gasping fit had vanished in less than a second. Cameron, move! Evan yelled, grabbing his shoulder as the mud began pouring down the steps. It took 40 minutes for the family to drag themselves out to the emergency shelter in the valley below. They were drenched, covered in mud, bruised, and shivering uncontrollably in the freezing rain. My father sat on a wooden bench, staring blankly at his mud-caked hands. My mother was huddled in a corner, clutching a thin foil blanket, her hair matted to her scalp. Tessa sat nearby, surrounded by 2 paramedics who were checking her vitals. Her oxygen levels are completely fine, the paramedic noted, shining a small pinlight into her eyes. She's just slightly cold. Give her some warm tea. Cameron stood near the entrance of the shelter, staring at Tessa, then looking down at his phone. His phone screen was cracked, but the last text message from me was still visible under the spiderweb glass. Not going. I'm going to Aldercrest. If I had been on that trip, if I had been in the car or the resort with Cameron remembered the original plan. My father had explicitly mentioned that if the storm got bad, I would carry Tessa's heavy medical kit while the boys cleared the path. I was supposed to be the buffer. I was supposed to be the one standing in the draft. Instead, I was gone. And without me there to absorb the impact, the delicate illusion of their perfect family had taken its very first crack. For days later, the storm cleared, and the Carver family returned home. The trip had been a complete disaster. They had spent 3 days in a crowded shelter with no electricity, eating cold rations, before the highway was finally cleared enough for emergency vehicles to escort them back to the city. The SUV rolled into the driveway of our suburban house at 3 in the afternoon. I'm going to lock her in her room for a month, my mother muttered through gritted teeth as she pushed open the front door. Her coat was still stained with dried mud, and her voice was laced with pure venom. She knew the weather was going to be bad. She said those awful things about mudslides to curse us, and then she ran off. Mom, calm down, Evan said, though his own face was dark with exhaustion. Let's just get inside. She's probably upstairs hiding. They walked into the living room. The house was deathly quiet. Willa, my father called out, his voice booming through the foyer. Get down. Here right now. No answer. Cameron frowned and walked up the stairs first. He pushed open the door to my bedroom. Willa stopped playing. He stopped dead in his tracks. The room didn't just look empty, it looked abandoned. The bed was stripped bare to the plain mattress. The closet door swung open, revealing empty hangers. The bookshelves, where my study guides and notebooks used to be stacked in neat, meticulous piles, were completely bare. Even the small desk lamp I had bought with my own saved lunch money was gone. The only things left in the entire room were sitting on the bare wooden desk, Under the window, a crisp white envelope and a single sheet of paper. Evan walked in behind Cameron, his sarcastic expression instantly freezing as he looked around the sterile, lifeless space. Where is her stuff? My parents rushed up the stairs next, followed by Tessa. What is she doing now? My mother demanded, barging into the room. Did she move her things into the guest room to throw another fit? Cameron didn't answer. He walked slowly over to the desk and picked up the sheet of paper. It was a formal, handwritten document. At the top, in my sharp, legible handwriting, were the words, Declaration of Financial Severance and Family Dissociation. To Mr. and Mrs. Carver, I have calculated the total cost of my basic living expenses, clothing, and high school tuition from the age of 15, when you brought me back from the farm, to the present day. According to standard regional metrics, the total amount spent on my upkeep over the past 3 years equals $12,400. I have left a certified cashier's check in the amount of $15,000 in the attached envelope. The remaining $2,600 serves as interest for the 3 years. As of today, I owe the Carver family nothing. Do not attempt to contact me. Do not come to my university. From this moment on, we are strangers. Willa Carver. Silence descended upon the room, a heavy, suffocating silence that felt colder than the storm in the mountains. My mother snatched the paper from Cameron's hands, her eyes scanning the lines. Furiously. Is she insane? $15,000. Where did she get $15,000? My father picked up the white envelope. Inside was a genuine bank-certified cashier's check drawn from the National Commercial Bank, made out directly to my father's name. For 3 years, while Tessa spent her monthly $500 allowance on designer bags, cosmetics, and expensive coffees, I had saved every single penny of the small, irregular transfers my father sent me out of guilt. I had worked late-night translation jobs online, stayed up until 3 in the morning editing academic papers for college students, and lived on the absolute bare minimum. I had built that $15,000 wall brick by brick, waiting for the day I could use it to buy my freedom. She's bluffing, Evan said, his voice shaking slightly as he looked at the empty closet. She can't just leave. She has no place to go. Her grades weren't even. Wait, Cameron whispered. His eyes had fallen onto a small piece of blue cardstock that had slipped out from beneath the cashier's check. He reached down and picked it up. It was an official, gold-embossed acceptance notification from the admissions office of Aldercrest University. Dear Miss Willa Carver, we are pleased to inform you that based on your exceptional performance in the National College Entrance Examination, District Rank Number 12, you have been admitted to the Department of Molecular Biology at Aldercrest University under the Dean's Honors Full Scholarship. District Rank 12. Evan read the words out loud, his voice cracking on the numbers. 12. In the entire Eastern District? That's impossible, my mother shrieked, her face turning bright red. Tessa was rank 450. Willa was always below Tessa in the school exams. How could she be ranked 12? Tessa, standing near the doorway, went completely pale. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her coat until her knuckles turned white. In school, my mock exam scores were always 1 rank below Tessa's, not because I couldn't beat her, but because every time I scored higher than her on a practice test, my mother would lock herself in her room and cry about how Tessa's delicate constitution was hurting her academic focus, while Cameron and Evan would lecture me for hours about not stressing Tessa out. So I stopped trying on the practice tests. I held back, kept my head down, and saved every ounce of my true strength for the one exam that actually mattered. My father stared at the gold emblem of Aldercrest University. Aldercrest was the premier university in the nation. It was the school that the city's top political and business elites fought tooth and nail to get their children into. Neither Cameron nor Evan had managed to clear its admissions threshold, settling instead for Maplehouse State. And the daughter he had dismissed as a stubborn, ungrateful farm girl had walked in through the front door on a full scholarship. She didn't lie, my father muttered, his phone slipping from his fingers and thudding softly onto the wooden floor. She was telling the truth the whole time. The weeks leading up to the official start of the autumn semester moved with quiet, steady grace. While the Carver household descended into a quiet nightmare of confusion and regret, I was thriving in the ancient, oak-lined campus of Aldercrest. Because I was an honors scholar, Dr. Halloway assigned me to a prestigious undergraduate research team working on cellular regeneration. My days were filled with lectures, lab work, and long, peaceful evenings spent reading in the massive stone library. I made my first real friend, a girl named Maya who shared my dorm suite. She was an architecture major from the West Coast, loud, fiercely loyal, and completely unbothered by small-town drama. Willa, look at this, Maya said one evening, sliding her laptop across our shared study table. The Regional University Athletic and Academic Summit was just announced for next month. It's being hosted right here at Aldercrest. I looked up from my microscope slides. The summit? Yeah. All the regional state schools are sending delegates, including Maplehurst State. Maya smirked. I heard their student union is throwing a massive fuss because Aldercrest only allocated them second-tier exhibition booths. I glanced at the screen. Maplehurst State, the school where Cameron, Evan, and Tessa were currently enrolled. I turned back to my microscope, adjusting the focus lens smoothly. They can bring whatever they want. It has nothing to do with me. Meanwhile, 40 miles away at the Maplehurst State campus, the atmosphere in the Carver family was anything but peaceful. Without me there to handle the cooking, cleaning, laundry, and Tessa's endless daily demands, the burden fell entirely onto Cameron and Evan. In the past, Tessa's fragile health meant that her dorm room had to be dusted twice a week, her meals had to be brought to her door, and her laundry had to be washed separately with hypoallergenic detergent. For 3 years, I had done all of it without a word of complaint. Now, Cameron was the one waking up at 6 in the morning to stand in line for Tessa's specific organic breakfast before his 8 o'clock engineering lecture. Evan was the one missing his soccer practice to run across campus with her forgotten inhalers. Evan, did you air out my bedding today? Tessa asked, strolling into the campus cafeteria where the two brothers were sitting over cold coffee. She dropped her designer handbag onto the table, her tone completely natural, as if ordering a servant. I felt a little dusty last night. I think I might be having an allergic reaction. Evan, who had stayed up until 4 in the morning completing a lab report, slammed his coffee cup down onto the tray. The splash of dark liquid spilled over the plastic edge, staining his notes. Do it yourself, Tessa, Evan snapped, his voice sharp and ragged. Tessa froze, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Evan, what's wrong with you? I'm just asking. You're 19 years old, Evan yelled, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. Several students turned to look. You have hands and feet. Air out your own damn bedding. Evan, Cameron warned, frowning as he pulled Tessa behind him. Watch your tone with her. No, Cameron. I'm sick of this. Evan turned on his older brother, his eyes bloodshot with anger and sleep deprivation. Do you have any idea how much time I've wasted doing things she can do herself? Willa used to do all of this and study enough to rank 12 in the district, and we called her lazy. The name Willa hung in the air like a heavy, suffocating cloud. Tessa's face twisted into an expression of bitter resentment. If you miss her so much, why don't you go find her? She doesn't even want you. She left $15,000 just to get away from you. Shut up, Tessa, Cameron said quietly. Tessa gasped, staring at Cameron in absolute shock. Cameron? You're taking her side. Cameron didn't look at her. He looked down at his phone, at the unopened text messages he had tried sending to my old number every single night for the past 3 weeks. Where are you eating? Are you getting enough sleep? Dad wants to send you money. Please call Mom. None of them had delivered. For 3 years, he had believed that Tessa was the glue holding their family together, the sweet, helpless little sister who needed their protection. But now, with the buffer gone, he saw the reality with terrifying clarity. Tessa wasn't fragile. She was a black hole that swallowed everyone's time, energy, and affection, leaving nothing behind. And the sister who had actually cared for them, the sister who had suffered in silence while bleeding herself dry to keep the peace, had walked away without looking back once. The day of the Eastern Regional University Summit arrived under a bright, crisp October sky. Aldercrest's expansive marble courtyard was filled with banners, exhibition tents, and hundreds of students from over 30 participating universities. As the host institution, Aldercrest's Honors Council, of which I was a junior student representative, was responsible for guiding visiting faculty and student leaders through the central exhibition hall. I wore a simple, tailored navy blazer over a white blouse, my honors badge pinned neatly to my lapel. My hair was tied back in a sleek ponytail, and my expression was calm, professional, and completely composed. Willa, the delegate team from Maplehurst State, just arrived at Booth B, Maya whispered, nudging my elbow as we walked through the glass atrium. They're throwing a fit because their display table isn't near the main stage. I glanced over casually. Standing near the secondary exhibition booth was the Carver family. My parents had driven up from the city to support the school's delegation. My father wore his usual expensive suit, looking stern, while my mother stood beside Tessa, fussing over her clothes. Cameron and Evan stood slightly apart from the rest of them, looking exhausted and visibly detached. As I walked past the row of booths accompanied by Dr. Halloway and 2 senior faculty members, my father's eyes suddenly caught mine. He froze. Willa, my father breathed out, his voice cutting through the noise of the atrium. My mother whirled around. When her eyes landed on me, on my pristine navy blazer, my honors badge, and the respectful way the university deans were walking beside me, her jaw dropped. Willa! My mother cried out, stepping forward to block our path. Willa, it's really you. Dr. Holloway paused, frowning slightly. Miss Carver, do you know these visitors? I looked at my mother. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous way she clutched her expensive leather purse, and the desperate, possessive glare in her eyes. They are visiting delegates from Maplehurst State, Dr. Holloway, I replied, my voice completely smooth and lacking any emotion. Please continue. The Dean of Engineering is waiting in the auditorium. Willa, stop right there. My father commanded, stepping forward with his old, familiares authoritative stance. Is that how you address your parents? You've been gone for 2 months. Not a single call, not a single visit. Do you have any idea how worried your mother and I have been? A few surrounding students and faculty members stopped, whispering among themselves. I stopped in my tracks. I turned around slowly to face him. Worried? I echoed softly. Mr. Carver, if I recall correctly, I left a certified check for $15,000 and a legal declaration of financial severance on my desk 2 months ago. Did you not receive it? My father's face turned beet red. That ridiculous piece of paper means nothing. We are your biological parents. You can't just pay a sum of money and erase the fact that we raised you. You didn't raise me, I said, my voice rising slightly, clear and loud enough to resonate through the entire glass atrium. My adoptive grandparents on the farm raised me until I was 15. You brought me back to your house because your conscience couldn't take the local rumors, and then spent 3 years treating me like an unpaid maid for your adopted daughter. Gasps erupted from the crowd of Aldercrest students surrounding us. Is she serious? That's the Carver family? I heard about them, the ones who favored their adopted kid over their real daughter. Look at her badge, she's a Dean's Scholar. They actually treated a Dean's Scholar like a maid. Cameron stepped forward, his face pale, his hands shaking at his sides. Willa, please, don't do this here. Let's go somewhere quiet and talk. There is nothing to talk about, Cameron. I looked at him, my eyes cool and clear. I warned you before I left. I told you I wasn't going on that trip. I told you I was coming to Aldercrest. You called me a liar, a selfish brat, and told me not to come home. Cameron choked on his words, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. Evan pushed past his brother, his eyes red-rimmed, looking at me with a mix of grief and desperate pleading. Willa, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't know. I didn't see how hard it was for you. You didn't see because you didn't care to look, Evan. I cut him off mercilessly. When Tessa dropped her glass, you stepped on my foot, left me bleeding on the floor, and ran out the door with her. You never looked back. Once. Why start caring now? Evan stumbled back, as if I had struck him across the face. Tessa, seeing her family losing complete control of the narrative, suddenly let out a faint gasp, clutching her chest as she slid toward the floor. Chest. I can't breathe. It was her classic, foolproof move. The move that had stolen every scrap of attention, every apology, and every bit of justice away from me for 3 years. In the past, the entire family would have dropped everything, panicked, and rushed to her side, glaring at me as if I were a murderer. This time nobody moved. My mother looked at Tessa, then looked at the crowd of distinguished professors, staring at them with utter disgust. For the first time in her life, my mother didn't reach down to scoop Tessa up. Instead, a flash of deep, bitter embarrassment crossed her face. Get up, Tessa, my father growled through gritted teeth, his voice trembling with sheer humiliation. Stop embarrassing us. Tessa froze mid-collapse, her fake gasps dying in her throat, her eyes wide with shock as she realized her ultimate spell had finally broken. I looked at the 5 of them standing there, broken, exposed, and drowning in the public ruin of their own making. Dr. Holloway, I said, turning back to my professor with a polite, serene smile. Let's move to the main hall. The presentation is about to begin. Of course, Miss Carver, Dr. Holloway nodded, looking at me with immense pride and respect. Right this way. I walked past them without a second glance, my footsteps even, light and perfectly steady against the polished marble floor. The aftermath of the regional summit was swift and unrelenting. Word of the scene in the atrium spread through the academic community like wildfire. The story of how the Carver family had neglected their top-tier biological daughter in favor of an entitled adopted child became the talk of both campuses. My father's business reputation took a massive hit. Several prominent alumni from Aldercrest who held high-level executive positions in the city quietly canceled their contracts with his firm, citing concerning ethical standards in personal leadership. At Maplehurst State, Cameron and Evan resigned from their student council positions. The guilt and social embarrassment proved too heavy, and the rift between them and Tessa became permanent. Within 2 months, Tessa transferred out of the main campus entirely, moving to a distant community college where no one knew her name. As for my parents, they tried sending letters to my dormitory every week. They sent care packages filled with expensive clothes, imported fruits, and handwritten letters from my mother begging me to come home for the holidays, swearing that everything had changed and that they missed their real daughter. I never opened a single one. Every box was handed directly to the campus charity drive, and every letter was fed straight into the shredder in the library lobby. 2 years later, it was a bright, golden afternoon in late May, the day of Aldercrest University's commencement ceremony. The grand auditorium was filled with thousands of parents, faculty members, and graduating students dressed in black academic gowns. I stood on the main stage, wearing the gold honors sash of the valedictorian. When I was 15, I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing clear and strong throughout the massive hall. I believed that my worth was defined by how much I could endure for the people who claimed to love me. I believed that love was a debt you had to bleed yourself dry to pay. In the back row of the auditorium, sitting in the shadows of the upper balcony, sat Cameron and Evan. They had bought tickets from a scalper just to sit in the very back, quietly, watching their sister shine from a distance. Tears ran down Evan's face as he clutched a crumpled, faded photograph of the three of us from the day I first came home from the farm, the only photo where I was still smiling. But standing here today, I continued, looking out at the bright, open horizon, beyond the auditorium windows. I know the truth. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see you. It is built by your own hands, brick by brick, choice by choice. The auditorium erupted into thunderous, roaring applause. I looked up at the glass dome of the ceiling, where the bright afternoon sunlight poured down, washing over me in a warm, golden sea. 7 days before I left that house, I saw a girl lying dead beneath the mud, forgotten by the world. Today that girl was gone, and in her place stood a woman who belonged entirely, beautifully to herself.